Have you ever been there? You go to all the trouble of setting a new static IP address for your computer in your router, and your PC just completely ignores you. It is one of the most common and honestly most maddening tech problems out there. Well, in this explainer, we are going to fix that for good.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start by really nailing down the problem we're talking about. Then we'll do a quick dive into the difference between IP types. After that, I'll walk you through 2 different fixes step by step. And finally, we'll get into the why this happens in the first place.
All right, first up, let's just make sure we're all on the same page about this incredibly frustrating issue.
Okay, so here's the scenario, and you've probably lived it. You log into your router's settings, you find your PC, and you assign it a nice, clean, static IP. Let's say 192.168.0.63. But your computer? Nope. It is stubbornly clinging to its old address. Maybe something random like 192.168.0.99. You've tried rebooting, you've tried waiting, and nothing. It just will not take the hint.
Okay, so to really solve this, we need a little bit of background. Let's quickly talk about what we're dealing with here. Dynamic versus static IPs.
So, at its most basic level, what even is an IP address? Well, think of it like a street address for your computer. It's just a unique string of numbers that lets every other device on the network and out on the big internet find it and talk to it. That's it. Simple as that.
And this is where it gets interesting. On the left, you've got the dynamic IP. This is what most of us have at home. It's a temporary address that your internet provider just hands out and it can change. But on the right, you have the static IP. This is a permanent, fixed address that never changes. And you'd want that for something you need to connect to reliably, like a home media server, or if you're setting up remote desktop.
All right, enough theory. Let's get our hands dirty and actually fix this thing. The first solution is my personal favorite because it's super fast and it uses a powerful little tool called the command prompt.
This is a beautifully simple 2-punch combo. First, you just open your command prompt. Then, you type ipconfig/release. That command basically tells your PC, hey, let go of that old IP address you're so attached to. And then, immediately after, you type ipconfig/renew. That one says, okay, now go ask the router for the new address you're supposed to have.
And just like magic, you'll see the result. After you run those 2 little commands, your PC immediately goes and talks to the router, it grabs that new static IP you assigned it, our 192.168.0.63, and you are good to go. Problem solved. It's that easy.
Now, if you're not a fan of typing commands into a black screen, don't worry, there is another way. We can do this with a few clicks right inside of Windows itself. Let's walk through that now.
Okay, so for this method, we do need to do a tiny bit of prep work. And yep, we're going right back to the command prompt, but just for a second. Type in ipconfig/all. This gives you a bunch of info, but you only need to write down 4 things. The IPv4 address, which is its current address, the subnet mask, which kind of defines your local network neighborhood, the default gateway, which is your router's address, the exit to the internet, and finally your DNS server, which is basically the internet's phone book.
Okay, now that you've got that info jotted down, you're going to head over to the control panel and navigate your way to your network connection properties. In the IPv4 settings, you'll see an option that's probably set to obtain an IP address automatically. You're just going to switch that to use the following IP address and then plug in all the numbers you just wrote down. This directly tells Windows exactly what its address should be, no questions asked.
Now, there is a really important warning that comes with this method. It's a powerful fix, but because you're manually setting this on your computer, if your internet provider ever changes your main public IP address, which they do, it could break your internet connection. If that happens, you just have to go back in and switch this setting back to automatic.
So all of this kind of begs the question, right? Why do our IP addresses even change in the first place? It might seem random, but there's actually a pretty clear logic behind it.
Really, it all comes down to efficiency. Your internet service provider, your ISP, has this giant but limited pool of IP addresses to hand out. To make sure there's always an address available for someone who's actively online, their system is constantly reclaiming addresses from devices that are turned off or disconnected and then reassigning them. It's like a library loaning out a limited number of books. And as a little side note, sometimes older router hardware can get a bit antsy and cause more frequent changes in this whole shuffle. So, let's just boil it all down. You now have 2 fantastic tools in your tech toolkit. For that quick, forceful update, the command line with release and renew is your absolute best friend. But for a more set it and forget it kind of approach on your local network, the manual Windows method works great. You just have to remember that little warning we talked about.
And that kind of leaves us with one final thing to think about.
We've just figured out how to become the master of our IP address inside our own home network. But that public IP address, the one that represents you to the entire World Wide Web, well, that's a whole different ballgame. And that one is controlled by your provider.